Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea and welcome back to another Creative Design Team video. This month the team is focusing on creative ways to use your stencils. I love stencils, they're so versatile, and I have 3 really fun techniques that I'm going to share with you in this video. The first technique is what I'm calling Stencil Sanding. So for this, I'm going to use a stencil. This could be like a rock pattern or kind of a giraffe pattern. I'm putting a piece of Toffee cardstock over top of the stencil and holding it in place with some washi tape. And then I'm using my Tim Holtz sanding block to just carefully sand over top of the stencil. And as I keep working away at it, the white core of the paper is exposed and you see that pattern coming through. It's kind of like when you used to do leaf rubbings when you were a kid with crayons. Kind of the same idea, except we're sanding. You could use any sanding block for this, including one that you get from the hardware store, but I think a block works a little bit better than just loose sandpaper because it takes the color off evenly. You probably want to use white core, either cardstock or pattern paper for this, just because it helps that pattern really pop when you sand the color away. I'm using paper towel here just to remove that excess color that we sanded off. I will have all the supplies that I'm using listed down in the description box so you can reference it all there. And for these greenery pieces, I used the Deck the Palms die and I cut them from Clover cardstock, which is the darker green, and Green Apple, which is the lighter one. And that lighter green actually has a nice shiny resist pattern on it. These sweet little images are from the Sweet Safari Cardmaking Stamp and Thin Cuts. I colored them up with my TriBlend markers, and then if you notice the black outside, that part is normally white, but I used a black marker to fill it in and really make it pop. Nothing is stuck down yet, but I'm just using this to help me line up my sentiment that says "Wild About You" from the animated Safari stamp set. Here is my finished card. You can see I added some little red hearts beside the sentiment using candy apple ink. And then I also used some foam tape to pop up the dark green layer of leaves. And I love how this looks with that sanded pattern in the middle. It kind of looks like maybe a rock background and totally fits the theme of this Valentine's card. Our next technique is adhesive sheet transfer. So basically I'm going to be using the adhesive sheets from Close to My Heart and my stencils to transfer some foil and some glitter. I have a piece of white cardstock and also a piece of the adhesive sheet in the same size. They're about 2.5 by 3.5 inches. And I'm just peeling back one end of the adhesive sheet so that I can carefully line it up to my cardstock and make sure that it's going straight. And then I'm just going to press it and remove the rest of that liner as I go. And that's just so that I try and avoid getting any air bubbles. Then I'm just going to remove the top layer of the liner. Basically for these adhesive sheets, they have a liner on both sides. So now I'm removing the other side and I'm going to be placing my stencil on top of the adhesive. This is one of the Close to My Heart card front stencils. It has a nice small leaf design on it. And I'm laying it down on top of the adhesive and I'm just going to gently press it down using the backer sheet for the adhesive. Just so that it's connecting. I don't want to press it really hard because I have to be able to peel it off of here afterwards. Then I'm going to use some foil. This is actually some Heidi Swapp heat reactive foil, but there won't be any heat today. I'm just going to cut a piece and lay it over top of my panel and then kind of just press over it with my fingers and work it down into the more open areas of the design. Next, I'm going to grab my embossing stylus because this design has a lot of little areas. And the embossing stylus actually has a nice small round end on it and works really well for getting in there into all the details. So I'm just going around the edges of the whole design and pressing that foil into the adhesive. I am going to fast forward through most of this process because it gets a little tedious, but I think you get the idea. As I start to peel up the foil, I'm just slowly pulling it up and checking the design to see if I missed anything. It is kind of easy to miss little spots here and there, So I found that just slowly peeling it up, checking to see if there's any pieces of foil missing was the best way to do it. And then I could lower it back down and repress it in so that I didn't have any gaps in the foil. And there is our beautifully foiled design. I love how this turns out. It's so pretty and so detailed. But now comes the tricky part. We have to very carefully peel this off of our stencil. So the best thing to do is just go slowly, start at one end, and just try and peel it right off the back. If you find this a little bit difficult, one thing that I thought worked really well was instead of mounting it on cardstock right away, I did all the foiling on the adhesive sheet and pulled it off the stencil first and then applied it to cardstock afterwards. And I think because it's a little bit more flexible, it actually peeled off of the stencil a little bit easier. If you don't have any foil, there's definitely other things you can use. You can use glitters and experiment with like different grades of glitter, really fine, a little bit thicker. You could use flocking if you have any of that in your stash. I know I still have 1 or 2 containers. And just play around with different things that you could stick to that adhesive sheet through the stencil. All those areas of white that you still see are still sticky. So we need to add one more thing onto this to make sure that it's not going to stick to everything once we have this on our card. So I am using some Glitter Ritz in Transparent Warm Highlight. And it's just a super fine, microfine glitter that I've had in my stash forever. And I just covered it up completely, make sure all the sticky is covered. And then with this glitter in particular, because it is so fine, it works better if you put it down and give it a good rubbing with your hand so that it kind of burnishes the glitter into the tape. Now I wish you could see this panel in person because the camera just does it no justice with the beautiful reflectivity of the foil and then that nice subtle glitter. It's really pretty. And here is how I use that panel on a card. So I have the white background there embossed with a wood grain embossing folder. And that nice little frame, that scallop frame around the foiled piece was actually cut on the Cricut because I didn't have any thin cuts or anything that matched that size. So I just made something on my Cricut. That cute little koala is from the Sending You Hugs stamp set. The leaves are from the same die that I used on the first card. And then I used Stitch Hearts thin cuts for my sentiment. Our final technique is stencil shifting. Now this is a fun one too. I'm going to start off with my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white card base, and I'm actually going to do the stenciling right onto my card front. This 12 by 12 heart stencil is a retired close to my heart stencil, and I'm just lining up the section I like best, and then I'm going to washi tape it into place so it's not shifting on me. Then I'm grabbing my raspberry ink and an inking tool to start applying my first layer. Now I really layered it up because I wanted this to be a very deep and vibrant pink. I would recommend whatever color of ink you plan to put down first, use something that's dark or something that's very pigmented. Now keep in mind all these techniques I'm showing you are on Valentine's cards, but they definitely don't have to be. You can adapt this to whatever stencils you have, whatever theme you're trying to create around. It's totally up to you. You can take these techniques and apply them to anything. Scrapbook pages, cards, home decor, art journaling, whatever kind of things you love to create, you can implement these techniques. Now that I have a good layer of that pink down, I'm just going to clean my stencil with a dry paper towel. I just want to make sure there's no pink left on the surface of that stencil because next up I am going to grab my White Daisy pigment ink and I want it mixing as little as possible with the raspberry color. My first step before I start inking is I need to lift up that stencil and shift it over just a little bit. I want to say it's maybe like a 1/16 of an inch. I don't think it's a full 1/8 of an inch. It's just shifting it over slightly so that basically the first color we put down is going to become the shadow. Then once that's in place, I can go ahead and start adding the White Daisy ink over top. It's pretty much inevitable to get a little bit of pink transfer into my white just because I'm adding a wet ink over top of my dye ink, and you'll see kind of a little pink spot start to form on my white ink pad. What I do with this is just afterwards I'll go back with a dry paper towel and just kind of lift off any of that pink ink. I kind of like to have two white ink pads, so I have one that's messier for techniques and I don't mind if a little bit of color gets into it. And then I usually keep one crisp white one just for stamping. So if I want to make sure I have nice bright white with no other ink colors, that's what I use. And here is that stencil reveal. Wow, I love how this turns out. Basically turns that dark pink into a shadow and makes the hearts look dimensional. It's so much fun. I hope you try this out and try it with a bunch of different patterns. And here is my finished card. So I used those green leaves from my previous cards, the Love You thin cut with some silver glitter paper and layers of raspberry cardstock underneath for some height and a little bit of shadow. And then that cute little sloth is from the Wild and Punny Stampin' Thin Cuts. Here are all three of the finished cards that I made using these techniques. I hope you enjoyed them. I would love to hear in the comments what your favorite technique was, and please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Now, the inspiration does not stop here. You can check out Janice and Katie's videos, which have already been posted, and I will link down in the description. And then come back tomorrow for Erin's video. She has a really fun project for you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.